The Italian Mafia is alive and well in New York City, and they're operating in places that you might not expect.
Take this cafe behind me. From May 2012 to just this past January, it was coffee and ice cream up front, and the feds say illegal poker games in the back.
These poker games were being run out of the Genovese crime family, one of the 5 major mafia families of New York City. Taking part in these illegally run poker games were everyday residents of Lynbrook, New York, an average suburb of New York City. Among these players were some maybe just down on their luck, others wanting to get away from their wives for a little, and others probably just had a gambling addiction. To an outsider, it might have looked like just a few guys playing cards, but this wasn't the only game in town. At Sal's Shoe Repair Shop in Merrick, Long Island, there were illegal poker games held in the back rooms of this ordinary store 3 nights a week. Then there was a Centro Calcio Italian club. On the surface, a legitimate community center, but on the inside, another front for illegal gambling.
Middle-aged and elderly men whose nicknames are Joe Fish, Sal the Shoemaker, Joe Box, and Little Anthony, out on bail while they fight to clear their names.
All of them were tied to the Genovese crime family, and all were facing charges linked to organized crime. But the truth is, the mafia doesn't look like it used to. They used to run the streets, now they're running spreadsheets.
The mob runs all the unions. That's their bread and butter. Certain unions, especially like the locals within New York City, you'll be in trouble or whatever if you go in there and try to start pushing people around, because that's still very, I would say, connected with organized crime actively.
To better understand how the Italian Mafia operates today, I talked to Tony Hernandez, an ex-New York City police officer and the owner of the YouTube channel Corruption Connection. I asked Tony what people get wrong about the Mafia today and what it actually looks like behind the scenes.
But they were social clubs where the mob did business, so you could find illegal gambling in there going on, card games, the Joker poker machine is just a slot machine sitting in the corner that might not spit out money, but when you win, you go to the bartender, you exchange the money.
What Tony's describing, the social clubs, the backroom card games, the labor unions, those are all just pieces of a much larger puzzle. The Mafia isn't just a few old Italians running illegal poker games. It's a structured, organized system, and in New York, that system has a name: the 5 families. Since the early 20th century, 5 powerful crime families have dominated organized crime in New York. There's the Genovese, Gambino, Lucchese, Bonanno, and Colombo families. Every Mafia family follows a chain of command. At the top of the chain is the boss, who's the undisputed leader. Below him, there's the underbosses that act like the second in command. Below them are the capos or captains, who are in charge of a group of soldiers. The soldiers are typically the ones doing the dirty work, like running the gambling rings, trafficking drugs, and in the past, carrying out violent acts. Along with the soldiers are associates participating in the dirty work, but the associates aren't officially part of the family. The guys at the top keep their hands clean and rake in the profits, while the soldiers and associates at the bottom are working to one day reap in the rewards. Each of the 5 crime families in New York City all have guys at these different levels.
I believe the Gambinos at that height were about 1,500, the Genovese about 1,000, Lucchese's maybe a few hundred, and so on and so forth. Because what the mob did in order to prevent law enforcement and informants from infiltrating their ranks is they closed membership. They closed the books, they call it.
As the FBI started cracking down on the Mafia in the 70s and 80s, the crime families realized that growing even further was risky. The Mafia knew that fewer new members coming in meant fewer risks, and because of this, they decided to close off their families to any new recruits. This is when the Mafia started moving away from the flashy violence and public rackets and shifted more towards the low-profile, white-collar crime that they embody today.
They're no longer killing people. They're kind of operating from the shadows, concentrated more on white-collar crime. They've legitimized themselves.
But this new level of secrecy isn't just about staying off law enforcement's radar. It's about protecting who you are, what you do, and keeping that information out of the wrong hands. But in today's world, you don't need to be a mob boss to want that kind of privacy. That's where this video's sponsor comes in, Delete Me. I'll admit, I used to think data brokers were just some vague part of the internet, not something that really ever affected me. But once I saw how much of my personal information they actually had access to, things like my birth date and even where I live, I knew I had to do something about it. These companies quietly gather and sell all your data, and the scariest part is that these scammers can use the information to impersonate you and attempt things like opening a bank account or taking out loans under your name. Considering the seriousness of these risks, I'm very glad there's a company like Delete Me that can remove your name from these lists. With Delete Me, all you have to do is submit your personal profile with info you want them to remove, and then their privacy experts scan the internet to find data brokers with your information. Within about a week, they'll send you a detailed privacy report showing which data brokers had access to your information and what they've successfully removed. And the best part? They'll keep checking and updating you with new reports quarterly so that your data stays off those lists, not just once, but over time. By clicking the link in the description or scanning this QR code, you're not only helping to support this channel, but you're also getting 20% off on a Delete Me consumer plan. Get started securing your digital privacy today by scanning this QR code or checking the link in my description, and thank you again Delete Me for sponsoring this video. Today, the New York City crime families are operating in more places than you might think. One of their major revenue streams comes from something called loan sharking. Loan sharking is where the mafia will lend money at insanely high interest rates to desperate people who can't qualify for loans from a bank. For example, if you take out a personal loan of $10,000 from a bank, this loan might come with an 8% interest rate. This means you would pay the bank $800 in interest by the end of the year. In a loan sharking scenario where you're taking out a loan from the mafia, that same $10,000 would come with a 10% weekly interest, not annually. That's $1,000 a week in interest alone. Say you miss a week, now you owe $11,000 and your new weekly interest payment is $1,100. This interest keeps snowballing if you aren't able to pay it off in full. From an outsider, this seems like a terrible deal, so I asked Tony who would ever take this kind of loan.
I think it's anybody, to be honest with you. It could be a guy who's down on his luck. It could be a gambler, somebody that likes to gamble, a local businessman that just needs to make payroll. You guys got a pizzeria or a deli, something like that. And it's also people that don't have really good credit. I've seen times that it's not always broke people. It's guys looking to expand and the bank just looks at them like they're a joke. I remember my cousin telling me a story once about this guy who had a bread route, right? And a regular Italian guy. And he's got all these clients. Now he's got a bread route and he needs to fund this business. He's got all the contracts. He's got all the signatures, all the promise, the orders are there. He needs to get going. He needs like $1 million to get this thing up and running. So if you look at the guy, he's got a baseball hat on, a t-shirt, he's got shorts. He walks into a bank, with his heavy Italian accent. And he's like, all right, listen, I got out of bread route. I got all these customers. This is my purchase orders. Like I need $1 million. And they just, these bank suits just looked at him like he had three screws missing. But he's a legitimate guy just looking for some help to start a business. So what did he do? He got denied by the bank and he went to the mob guys, and the mob guys knew who he was, gave him, knew what he was about, knew what he was going to do, and lent him $1 million. So it's not technically someone that's always down on their luck. It could be somebody that, wants to expand, wants to grow, and maybe isn't afforded the traditional route of obtaining a bank loan.
But not everyone borrowing money from the mafia is starting a bread business. A lot of times, that loan is just the first bet, because one of the mafia's most reliable and profitable businesses has always been gambling.
The backbone of the mob has been and always will be gambling.
When it comes to gambling, one of the most common methods that the mafia uses to make money is hosting high-stakes poker games in the back rooms of bars, social clubs, and different storefronts. These games are never advertised publicly. They're run through word of mouth and personal invitations. They are done very discreetly and run out of what seems like legit businesses. But oftentimes, they're not discreet enough.
New Jersey State Police, meanwhile, say they broke up a mafia-run gambling ring across North Jersey.
This was not a backyard betting pool. This was a highly structured, highly profitable criminal enterprise run by people who believed they were above the law.
A 2-year investigation by New Jersey officials led to 39 individuals being charged in this illegal gambling operation. All 39 people were either direct members of the NYC Mafia family or were associates working on their behalf. The head of this family was known as Georgie Neck Zappola, or otherwise known as the Boss. Below Georgie Neck, though, was a whole list of other underbosses, capos, soldiers, and associates all caught in the crime. These gambling rings held in the back of legitimate businesses in North Jersey were highly structured, where the underbosses delegated to their capos, who then delegated to the managers, who then delegated to the managers of the stores, who then delegated to the hosts and agents running the rings. Among the different businesses found to have illegal gambling rooms were Cafe San Gennaro in Woodland Park, New Jersey, the Italian-American Soccer Club in Tattawa, New Jersey, Garden Pinball in Paterson, New Jersey, and an unnamed restaurant in Garfield, New Jersey. The Lucchesi family was able to rake in over $3 million from these backroom gambling rings, and they were able to do so with the help of a city councilman.
You think about where this infiltrated into local governments, into appointed and elected officials.
Of the 39 arrested was a man named Anand Shah, a Prospect Park borough councilman who was elected to public office. Shah was working alongside the Lucchesi family, managing illegal poker games in the backroom clubs across Tattawa, Garfield, and Woodland Park. He was also responsible for overseeing an offshore online sports book, which is where online users place sports bets on an illegal platform. Shah was not made a member of the Lucchesi crime family, but he was an associate who reported to higher-ups in the Lucchesi ruling panel, like boss Georgie Neck and Joseph Big Joe Perna. Prosecutors also alleged that Shah used one of his Subway franchises to launder around $570,000 in gambling-related transactions. This goes to show just how deep the mafia has penetrated even into local governments.
Personally, from my experience and from what you see, the cops and the mobsters work hand in hand. They work together. It's always been like that. It always will be. The mob is a real part of life. It's not like you can just throw them away, lock away the key, and that's it. They're so intertwined in society and, kind of embedded in the social fabric that it's almost impossible to weed them out.
It's unfortunately relatively common for law enforcement officers and elected officials to take bribes from the mafia so that these government agencies will let the mafia operate without any issues. Just in March of 2025, a Brooklyn federal jury convicted Hector Rosario, a detective with the Nassau County Police Department, for conspiring with the mafia. Prosecutors revealed that Rosario had received monthly payoffs ranging between $1,000 to $1,500 from the Bonanno crime family in exchange for protecting their illegal gambling operations on Long Island and Queens. Rosario would allegedly fake stage police raids at gambling dens run by the Genovese crime family, places like Sal's Shoe Shop and the Grand Cafe. The goal wasn't to shut them down officially, it was to scare off their regular gamblers. Once word spread about these raids, those gamblers would stop showing up at the Genovese spots and start frequenting Bonanno-run poker games instead. Rosario would even give tips to his fellow detectives about the Genovese-ran gambling rings, making sure the Genovese family's operations got targeted while the Bonannos flew under the radar.
I read a bombshell lawsuit from a former police commissioner, Tom Dowling, who says the NYPD is criminal at its core. It's operating like a mafia family. So, when you look at things like that, there really wasn't a difference between the cops and mobsters. In my days in the restaurant business, before I was actually on the job, I would see a wise guy sit next to a deputy inspector.
Wise guys is a term used around the mafia to describe a member of a crime family. But who's actually walking into these back rooms to gamble? Who's risking their money and sometimes a lot more to play poker at mafia-run gambling dens? Well, one of the reasons comes down to convenience.
Let's say you're a neighborhood person. You don't have money to go to a bus ride to go to Atlantic City, or even Resorts World doesn't have table games. You have to go all the way to the Catskills. Meanwhile, the guy in the local deli has a card game going on where if you don't have any money, you can still gamble. You just take a loan from the loan shark. You're right there as long as he knows who you are.
Oftentimes, compulsive gamblers will take out loans from the mafia that they know that they can't pay back, but they'll gamble this money with the mafia, chasing a big win. These compulsive gamblers will often lose thousands of dollars that they never had to begin with, but the mob would keep extending them more and more credit, knowing that these gamblers were hooked. In some cases, these gamblers would end up owing over $100,000 in gambling debts and on interest from their loans. The mafia knows that this person wouldn't be able to pay back their debt, but that's not all the mafia was looking for. Once somebody owes this much, they're not a client anymore. They're now an asset to be used. For example, the mafia will run much of their bets and operations through this man's name so that the mafia stays clean. As these compulsive gamblers keep digging themselves deeper and deeper into debt, the mafia just then gets more and more control over this person's life. But even for the more sophisticated gamblers who aren't gambling their lives away, there's still an incentive to be gambling with the mob. There's some big-time gamblers with a lot of money who would much rather gamble with the mob than they would with a legally run casino.
I've never been in any really big games like this where guys are betting 6 figures to $1 million. Like, I think that the highest game that I've ever maybe been in that was on the table was less than 6 figures, 50 grand maybe, which is a lot of money, but not at that level to the 6 figures to $1 million. But recently I saw that Caesars refused to pay out a bettor that made a legitimate parlay. It was like, I don't know how insane this parlay was, but he hit it, and it was like for several $1 million. And the casino just decided not to pay him out.
And I won $350,000.
But they won't pay it to you.
No, they will not.
I won $500,000. They will not pay my money out.
You invite somebody to your business, they pay the money, they win, you're supposed to pay.
Could that happen with the mob guys? Sure, but most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, they're gonna pay you what they owe you. Because if they don't, then the reputation spreads around. Hey, Tommy or Blake or whatever went in there, he won legitimately, they didn't pay him his money. And, I think that's something that resonates with a lot of big time gamblers. You know that the word is your bond. You don't have to go through all this corporate bullshit or, oh, look, Caesars has this little thing on the ticket that says we cannot pay you if we don't feel like it. You don't deal with that kind of bullshit when you deal with the mob. Everything is usually above board, and you're dealing with serious men. Like, you could lose your life at any second. So there's no time for games. Like, guys are not in there trying to scam,
Caesars and many of the other major casino companies are all regulated by the federal, state, and local governments. These casinos also pay the governments a share of their earnings, given they're all under something called revenue sharing arrangements. Although government-regulated casinos have historically been less corrupt, there is a real argument to be made for why the mob-run gambling rings operate better. For one, many mob figures have been arrested for gambling operations, only to see the government adopt the same tactics and rake in billions. Second, the mob typically reinvested their profits locally to places like restaurants, clubs, and delis, who were all owned by wise guys. Today's state-sponsored casinos often send their share of the profits to state budgets, corporate headquarters, and Wall Street investors, only making the rich richer and the poor poorer. Government-partnered casinos are aggressively marketed to vulnerable populations, especially in economically depressed areas. The mob ran the table games and sports books, but not the constant dopamine addiction machines and sports books that legal casinos now profit from.
I mean, if you went to a wise guy and you continually gambled and you lost, and he saw that you were mortgaging your house and all that stuff, most of the time, not all the time, there was some bastards, but a lot of times they'd be like, you got a family. I'm not taking your bets anymore. You're not allowed to gamble here or anywhere. Don't let me find you gambling anywhere else until you pay this back. Like, they would kind of, put the pressure. Go to Caesars and tell them, hey, listen, I just liquidated my house. My kids are going to be in the street, this and that. They would let you gamble until the last penny and then take security to kick you out.
To a certain degree, many people felt safer and more connected to their neighborhoods when the mafia ran the streets of New York City. Oftentimes, disputes over rent, business conflicts, and even domestic problems were sometimes handled by mob-connected figures, not the police or courts. This created a stronger sense of internal community, even though it was more based on fear and loyalty, rather than what we aim for today, democracy and justice. In a world where legal casinos can deny payouts and push addiction, the wise guys sometimes offered a different kind of gamble. One where a handshake meant more than some fine print. And special thanks to Tony Hernandez for taking time to teach me about the ways of the mafia. You can find him and listen to his crazy stories on his Corruption Connection YouTube channel. And speaking of hidden operations and unexpected betrayals, there is probably no greater betrayal that the US government has ever faced than from a man named Humam Khalil al-Balawi. Al-Balawi completely fooled the United States CIA into thinking that he was working for them, and you can uncover that whole story in my recent video here. And thank you again, Delete Me, for sponsoring this video. To get your data removed from the internet, make sure to check out Delete Me by using this QR code on the screen, and you'll even get 20% off.